How you doing, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Luke Innes. I've moved position, as you can see, in a new location in the room. Also, hopefully you've noticed that the camera quality is hopefully a little bit different. You know, I've finally, after, almost a year of doing this, had a fiddle with the camera's settings and found something that sort of, as far as I can see on the LCD on the back of the camera, works. Trying to get back on this review train. The sabbatical from the podcast hopefully is going to give me a bit of time that I can dedicate to this that I wouldn't usually have. And I figured I'd dive back into it with something particularly extreme because, if you watch my channel regularly, you will know that I do like reviewing the more extreme forms of cinema, or rather than extreme, I suppose transgressive would be the word. I've reviewed movies like Baise-Moi, and I'm going to be reviewing one of those movies today. It's a 2007 Argentine uber exploitation movie by the name of Snuff 102. So the movie was written and directed by Mariano Peralta. It stars Yamila Greco and Eduardo Poli. And it essentially tells the story of a female journalist who is only identified in the credits as Victima 102, Victim 102. She's a journalist who's investigating the world of underground online snuff movies and their manufacture, etc. She consults a film critic who's very concerned with portrayals of violence and stuff. That's a subject that he's written on a lot, and that's interspersed through the film, her discussion with him. The film has a really weird narrative. She ends up becoming a victim in one of these snuff movies along with two other women. And the narrative is non-linear. It bounces between her researching this stuff and, her, in this situation where she's being attacked, and her discussions with the film critic. I mean, the movie itself, I've got to say, it starts off... there's about 10 minutes of stuff before you actually get to, the start of the plot and the basis is laid. And I don't think it works particularly in the movie's favour, actually. I think that it should have, kind of kicked off from, I guess, the start of the story, if you like. I really think that, all the stuff initially with, showing clips from, seedy internet videos, with animal cruelty and all that sort of thing, and then showing a little bit of what was going on in the torture. It really killed the pace at the start of the movie. I think that maybe, that could have come in a little bit later on, and maybe a more linear approach in at least the earlier part of the movie would have been beneficial. I've got to say though, the plot of the movie is quite interesting. I think that this whole world of a journalist investigating this sort of thing is quite an interesting basis for the plot. Unfortunately, it's not the most well executed of plots imaginable. I'm not going to spoil the movie, but I've got to say that when the twist comes, it's pretty obvious, because when the twist comes into it, that's pretty much the only way the plot can go by that point. That's genuinely the feeling you get, and that's unfortunate because there are some interesting ideas presented in the movie. These ideas of a journalist investigating something and ended up caught up in the kind of carnage of it. That's quite an interesting basis for this story. As the title implies, there is quite a lot of very, very dark, very cynical, very gory, very horrible, frankly, violence in the movie, particularly against these three women. In terms of the special effects, I've got to be honest, it's a mixed bag. Not so much in terms of the quality of the effects, because they're mostly quite good, I've got to say, but the gore scenes in general are very mixed. For instance, there's a scene where a woman is having her skin kind of stretched out and nailed, having nails put through it into the floor, and this is shot on a very low resolution video, as if it's from one of these snuff movies. And if you were less media literate than me, that would probably be a really effective scene, but obviously to me, I see that as something that deliberately masks what is perhaps not a great effect. It's one of the unfortunate things that watching a lot of films and studying a lot of film techniques you know, to a certain extent can have on your enjoyment of a film, I guess. Yeah, and on that vein, I think there are instances where the movie's budget does get in its way a little bit. You know, there's, for instance, a scene where a character is attacked, with, you know, hit in the head with a rock and then dismembered with a machete. And that scene is totally out of keeping with the kind of tone of the rest of the killings in the movie, because it is, and the rest of the scenes of violence in the movie, because it's shot in such a way that you don't actually see any kind of, you know, of the attack actually happening. You know, you see splashes of blood and that sort of thing. And it's obviously because they couldn't produce the effect properly on their budget at that point, which is a great shame, because, you know, it could have been a really effective scene. It's just unfortunate that they, you know, they faked that one out a little bit, and it feels a little bit like you've been cheated at that point. That said, there are some really great effects in the film. There's a scene where someone gets their fingers cut off that is just grueling to watch. There's another very grueling scene in which someone has their head beaten in with a hammer, you know, really violently beaten in. You know, they're close to death and their head is just smashed to fuck with this claw hammer thing. And scenes like that are really, really grueling, and you know, they really do the job that this movie is trying to do, which, you know, is ultimately just to, you know, disgust you, frankly. It's supposed to be, I guess, a simulation of some sort of, you know, snuff video that you might see online, you know, a lot of one lunatic, one ice pick type thing. I've got to say, sort of, you know, kind of summarising my thoughts on the movie, I think that this is an interesting movie, and some of the stuff it tries to do, it does do really well. Ultimately, when it comes to the actual kind of nastiness and grue of the movie, it kind of hit the nail on the head in most places. That said, the movie is quite slow. It's quite difficult to follow because of the narrative jumping around so much. At times it is a bit overstretched, I think, and, you know, there are other times where the payoff just doesn't really come for me. Overall, I'm going to give Snuff 102 a 6 out of 10. I think this is a film that potentially you might enjoy, or at least appreciate if you're interested in this kind of cinema. But, you know, for everyone else, I'd say don't worry. Thank you very much for watching this video, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a pleasure to be back to reviewing, honestly. Please go down into the description, check out the links there. There's a link to my podcast where you can check out some of our older episodes. There's a link to my Amazon wishlist, which it would be very, very cool if you were to check out some of the stuff on and maybe consider buying me something off of it. And yeah, I'll definitely review it if you do that, because that is just the coolest thing you could possibly do to help support this channel and my addiction to buying movies. Other than that, all it remains is for me to say thank you, and I promise there won't be such a big gap between reviews next time. See you soon.